Well, I watched the late night screening of The Force Awakens and I thought, why not review it? Don't worry, I try to avoid explicit spoilers and only talk freely about things we already knew thanks to promotion material. But I will talk about my general thoughts on the plot and major characters. While I don't go into too much detail, it might affect your enjoyment. First of all, yes, it is better than the prequels. The dialogue is far better written and seems natural for the most part. It's witty and there are no dull discussions about politics. But it's a little bit too witty at times. Some deliveries could have been a little bit more dramatic, and to be honest, there was a certain lack of memorable lines. Of course, I say the famous "I have a bad feeling about this" line at one point, but there are simply no new additions. The other 6 movies had at least one line that stuck, either because it was a good wham line, it was especially funny, or because it was somewhat stupid. The dialogue in this movie basically stayed on the same level all the way through. Nothing was really exceptional. That being said, I watched the German dub of this movie and maybe some lines are more memorable than the original. It should also be noted that most comic reliefs come from this witty dialogue. Sure, sometimes our characters do funny things, but it's mostly limited to a short moment. There's no plucky comic relief character that only exists to entertain small children. There's no Jar Jar, and while C-3PO appears, his role is very limited. Yet it manages to become the perhaps funniest Star Wars movie yet, without being ridiculous. The main focus is on our new lead characters and Han Solo. And oh boy, Harrison Ford still got it. You don't see him playing the role of an old Han Solo, you only see Han Solo in his later years. Han is still the lovable rogue we remember, everything he does seems fitting. He also plays a little bit the role of Ben Kenobi in this movie. He's a cool old guy and mentor figure for the next generation of heroes, and his dynamic with the new cast is simply amazing. Of course Chewbacca is at his side, and their banter is as great as ever. They really managed to capture those two. Next there's Finn, our male lead character. He's a sympathetic guy, and his background as a former stormtrooper is intriguing. You should know this from promotion material, so it's no spoiler. His struggle to deal with a situation he does not fully understand is somewhat engaging, and we learn a few things about the First Order thanks to his background. This is also a minor problem, you see. He knows a little bit too much for a simple stormtrooper, and he really is a bad stormtrooper, I want to add, because he actually managed to hit his targets. Our female lead is Rey, and she's quite badass. She does not simply play the role of a damsel in distress, and has an interesting background as well. We don't learn too much about her in this movie, even though she plays a major role, but I'm certain that they will explore her character in the following sequence. But I'm a little bit worried about her role. You see, she's an ace. She pretty much manages everything without a problem, and I can hardly point out any flaws. It's too early to judge her, but I feel that JJ wants to compensate for the fact that there are only like 2 interesting female characters in all of episode 1 to 6 by making her too perfect. I don't say she is a Mary Sue type of character, and I like her so far, but I fear that she turns out to be one. I also want to point out that pretty much every character bonds a little bit too quickly, but that's a staple in the series. After all, Luke was more devastated by the death of the old man he barely knew than the death of his uncle who raised him. And then there is the First Order. I really like the concept that they are still Imperial loyalists. It's not a new one as far as I know. I heard that the Thrawn trilogy is a good take on this concept, but JJ's take on it is quite cool as well. They are ruthless, perhaps even more so than the Empire during the original trilogy, and we actually learn a few things about their inner workings. While he's not the leader of the First Order, they are mainly represented by Kylo Ren. That guy with the crossguard lightsaber. And to be honest, I'm not his biggest fan, and it has nothing to do with his lightsaber design. Thing is, we learn a lot about him in this movie. It's not entirely a bad thing, as he is an interesting character, but we learn more about him than about Rey. He's not simply the bad guy, and I appreciate that. But because they try to make him sympathetic, he seems less threatening with every detail we learn about him. It's like explaining Darth Vader's backstory in episode 4. It makes him more interesting to see his struggle, but Star Wars villains are more about presence. Episode 1 wasn't a good movie, but Darth Maul is an undeniable badass. Just look at him, he only speaks like 2 lines in the entire movie, but his mere presence is threatening. Most secondary characters come a little bit short. They add a lot to the story and atmosphere, but as an individual they barely get any screen time or development. It's obvious that they will play a greater part in the sequels, but I can basically say this about every character in this movie. It gives us some bits, but makes it clear that we have to watch the sequels as well to grasp the whole picture. And I want to learn more about them, so it does something right. However, the plot itself is self-contained enough to stand on its own. It's a pretty solid setup and has a familiar feeling to it. It borrows quite a few elements from the original trilogy, and there are plenty of continuity nods, from direct reference to visual jokes in the Millennium Falcon and so on. This feeling of familiarity is great for any fan, but there's also a problem with that. It makes some things way too predictable, while other things are predictable for other reasons. There's also a small tendency to explain the obvious, while cryptic things are left unexplained. This is not a bad thing, mind you. It makes some aspects more mystical and intriguing. It would also be boring to reveal everything in the first movie, but some questions could have used a clear answer right away and didn't get them, while some twists are revealed too early and less dramatic than they should. But it works overall because they still mixed it up with enough new stuff to keep things interesting. I also want to praise the marvelous pacing of this movie. There was never a dull moment, the scene transitions were always at the right moment. At no point I had the feeling that this movie dragged on. The worst part of this movie was therefore the ending. Not only because it ended, but the way it ended. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed every last minute, but the last scene should have been either 10 minutes longer or not in this movie at all, but in the next. It was simply a weird cut, if you ask me. I guess I should also talk about the visuals. It looked gorgeous. The practical effect and the use of CGI worked in perfect harmony. The landscapes looked epic. It looked like the original trilogy with a modern touch to it. Anyway, let's wrap things up. Star Wars Episode VII, The Force Awakens, is a love letter to all Star Wars fans. It managed to capture the spirit of the original while adding a lot of new things as well. The characters are interesting and it looks beautiful. I nitpicked a little bit, but overall I like this movie. Is it the best Star Wars movie yet? I wouldn't say so. It's a really good movie, but on an individual level, it's a little bit below episode 5, 4 or 6. It just doesn't feel as complete as one of these three, but rather like something that should be watched back to back with its eventual sequels. I also want to point out that I saw this movie once, and maybe I missed a few things. But what about you? Have you already seen The Force Awakens? If yes, did you like it? If not, are you excited? Let me know in the comments. I am Darth Wolpers, and may the Fox be with you.